Good Wednesday morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Southern Oregon Weather Midweek Update. We'll start by reviewing the rain and snow totals from the storm that moved through over the past few days. Some of the snowfall was pretty significant, but I'm not going to include any April Fool's jokes or exaggerate the snow totals. The totals I'll discuss will be legitimate. We'll also discuss our weekend forecast, and then for a long-range outlook, I want to share with you the way that our teleconnection correlations change as we move further into April. So first, if we look at the KMAX radar on top of Mount Ashland, it's showing some showers still lingering over the Cascades, but not much going on in the valley. Looking out my window right now, I'm seeing some puffy cumulus clouds, but showers have mainly died down overnight. However, they'll pick up again a little bit this afternoon. Here's the high-resolution rapid refresh model showing the showers picking back up again for this afternoon, mainly over the higher terrain of the Cascades, but some for the Siskiyous as well. So let's discuss what happened from the storm that moved through over the last few days. If you can remember, on Sunday, I shared with you two models. The WRF was forecasting up to 2.5 feet of snow over the Cascade crest here, with lesser amounts for the Siskiyous, about 6 to 8 inches. And the Canadian model was also showing significant amounts, once again about 2.5 feet of snow, maybe even up to 30 inches for some of the highest terrain over the Cascades. And this forecast, believe it or not, largely verified. Here is data from 3 different SNOTEL sites. The top bar here is from Annie Springs, which is the SNOTEL site closest to Crater Lake. We can see we went from a snow depth of 68 inches on Sunday morning, the morning of the 29th, to 87 inches this morning. Now remember, the way that these SNOTEL sites record snow depth is accumulated snow depth. So there's a pillow that is connected to various sensors. Snow falls on top of that pillow, and then it's recorded by the sensors. There's no clearing that happens like there would be clearing of a snow stake at a ski resort. So the snow has significant time to settle in between readings every hour. And so these totals here, this change in snow depth, doesn't necessarily reflect all of the snow that actually fell because there was significant settling going on. If we look at the liquid precipitation amounts that fell, we see we went from 30.2 inches to 33.2 inches. So 3 inches of liquid precipitation. Even assuming a very low snow-to-water ratio of 8 inches, that's 2 feet of snow. Once again, that's settled down to about 19 inches of new snow depth, but at the very least, it looks like Crater Lake received about 2 feet of snow, and assuming a more reasonable snow-to-water ratio of 10 to 1, that's 30 inches of snowfall. And yes, that can settle quite a bit, so I wouldn't be surprised if Crater Lake picked up between 2 to 2.5 feet of snow, just like the models were forecasting. Same story at Big Red Mountain. Obviously, the models were calling for much lesser amounts for the Siskiyous. However, if we look once again at the liquid precipitation amounts that fell, the forecast performed very well. We were calling for about 6 inches of snow for the Siskiyous. We can see we received about 0.7 of an inch of liquid precipitation. Again, assuming a pretty average snow-to-water ratio of 10 to 1, maybe a little bit lower because it was warmer in the Siskiyous, we can see that about 4 to 5, maybe even 6 inches of snow fell over the Siskiyous. So why did the snow depth not change over the last few days? Well, once again, there was significant settling that went on. If you look at the full data set over the last few days, you can see the snow totals jump from 48 to 51 inches, then settle back down to 48, then go back up to 51. So on the whole, about 6 inches of snow fell for the Siskiyous. And I've included one more. This is for the SNOTEL site closest to Willamette Pass. And here we can see this site also received 3 inches of liquid precipitation on the dot, just like Crater Lake, interestingly. And here there was some settling too. Settled down to about 22 inches of added snow depth. But guys, this was a significant late spring or mid-spring storm, and I'm happy that the models performed so well. I know I was confident in this forecast, more confident than usual, because that jet stream was sitting over Oregon for most of the event, and that extra orographic enhancement really boosted the snowfall amounts to what the models were showing. So, what can we expect going into the rest of our week? Well, we're going to clear out after our showers today. On Thursday and Friday, it looks like we'll see some drier and sunnier conditions. Here's the Weather Channel forecast for the next few days. And you can see our storm system here is exiting our area and moving into the Rockies. That's what the 500 millibar map is showing. But then moving into the weekend, it looks like another system tries to slide into southwest Oregon. Models have been bouncing back and forth on the track of the system, but it seems like they've come into agreement that the first wave happens about on early Sunday morning. Not quite sure how far south this first wave will go, but if it stays far enough north, we could certainly see some showers from that first wave. Then the second wave moves in a little bit later. It looks like Saturday afternoon, moving into Sunday morning and hanging around Sunday afternoon as well. So snowfall amounts with the system, once again, here's the WRF, which does sometimes tend to overdo things. There isn't as much support from the jet stream for the system, so I wouldn't expect these snowfall amounts to be quite as high as the WRF is showing. But nonetheless, I think we could see, once again, about 6 inches for the Siskiyous, and maybe 8 to 10 inches for the Southern Oregon Cascades, including Crater Lake. Maybe not quite up to 12 to 14 inches like this model is showing. So after that, the models disagree slightly on what's going to happen. This is a week from today, so next Wednesday. Upper left is the GEFS, the American model, then the Canadian on the upper right, and the European at the bottom. And you can see all of them have this area of low pressure moving into Southern California. However, for our region, the Canadian model is showing quite a bit more troughing than the other two models. Both the GEFS and the EPS show ridging, so warmer and drier conditions. This is this warmer and drier period that we've been highlighting now for the last week or so. We expected some warmer and drier times around this period, April 8th or 9th, and it looks like that's going to happen. Even the Canadian model has been trending warmer and drier with this period. So for the middle of next week, I would expect us to see some pretty spring-like temperatures and some warmer and sunnier conditions. And you can see the models have been trending warmer and drier with that period for the middle of next week. These red colors mean that there's been a trend toward a lot more ridging over Oregon and troughing farther north into the central part of the U.S. Same story on the Canadian ensemble as well. More troughing in the central part of the U.S., more ridging off the west coast. And I think part of this is because of the way the models are anticipating that the Madden-Julian oscillation is going to evolve. They've been wavering back and forth on this. At first, they were showing the Madden-Julian oscillation taking a more active track through phases 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Then all of the models wanted to bring the MJO more into the null phase, but now they're kind of back to what they had at first with a more active MJO, and some of these phases are a little bit warmer. Here we're just coming out of phase 3. You can see these cooler areas for California. That lines up reasonably well with the conditions that we'll see with that first piece of energy, especially diving south of our area. But then look, phases 4, phases 5 are a little bit warmer. Those could line up well with that warmer and drier period we're going to see next week. But then phases 6 and 7, a little bit cooler, especially for the northern part of the United States. And then phase 8 and 1 trend back warmer again. So MJO looking like it's going to be a little bit more active than the models guessed at first. And it looks like that lines up well with the warmer conditions we can expect next week. And then maybe a return to cooler and wetter conditions after that. Here's day 10 on the European on the bottom, GEFS on the upper left, and the Canadian upper right. They're all showing some kind of a return to troughing after that warmer and drier period, the middle of next week. However, they disagree on exactly where the trough's going to set up. Some of these models have the troughing more into the central part of the United States, and some of them have it digging back farther west, which would affect our area a little bit more. However, this pattern, this general idea of the ridge being off the west coast and troughing somewhere over the west to central part of the United States, all the models agree on that. It's just a question of where exactly this pattern is going to set up. Is it going to be farther east or farther west? We're not quite sure. So for the end of the video, I wanted to share with you the way that our teleconnections change as we move further into the spring. So we've talked a lot about the PNA, probably the biggest driver, the most important teleconnection for our area, one of the more important ones. Here in March, you can see that a negative PNA at the top here is associated with a lot of troughing over the northern part of the United States and some into the Pacific Northwest. However, as we move into April, we see that it's associated with more troughing over the northern plains, and see this ridging that starts to creep into California? That could be an indication that maybe the European model has the most accurate idea of what's going to happen, with this ridge sitting closer to the west coast and more of the cold air moving into the central part of the United States rather than digging back to the west. See that similarity with the April PNA correlations? Very similar to the European model's forecast. If we look to some of our other teleconnections, we have the PMM region here, the Pacific Meridional Mode. That's been trending more negative throughout this winter. Might still be overall a slightly positive anomaly, but definitely trending more negative than it has been. And a negative PMM state is associated with cooler and wetter conditions over the west. It's just that combined with the PNA here, it could mean that the colder and wetter conditions set up over the Rockies more so than into Oregon. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Overall, the climate models like the Canadian climate model, the CANCIPS that just came out yesterday, they're still calling for below average temperatures and above average storminess for the Pacific Northwest. But once again, I think it could be centered maybe a little bit more into the Rockies rather than along the west coast. So guys, just to recap, we see that our snowfall forecast largely verified. A lot of places in the Cascades saw 2+ feet of snow. Liquid precipitation amounts of up to 3 inches, which for some areas with those higher snow to water ratios at the higher elevations, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the peaks, like the Three Sisters, Mount Jefferson, if they received up to 3 feet of snow from this system. Snowtail sites, though, showing generally 18 to 24 inches. We received about 6 inches in the Siskiyous, just like our forecast was calling for. Talking about the weather the rest of this week, we're going to be a little bit drier today, maybe some showers for the afternoon. Then Thursday and Friday, maybe even a little warmer and drier still before showers return for the weekend. We're still expecting that warmer and drier spring-like period for the middle of next week, and in fact models have been trending warmer with this. In the long run, we see that the models are kind of struggling about what to do with the Madden-Julian oscillation, and they've been flip-flopping back and forth from run to run, and so that decreases our forecast confidence in the long term, but those teleconnections are still suggesting a cooler and wetter April on balance, although that cold air could be centered more into the Rockies and the northern plains versus the Pacific Northwest. So guys, I know this was a little bit of a longer video today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to set your notifications for that weekend update. I'll have some new information for you for the weekend update as well. And leave a comment if you like what you saw in the forecast.